Today we'll be doing lesson 20. God promoted Joseph and took Israel into Egypt. In our last lesson, we read how Joseph was sold to traders who took him into Egypt, where he was sold as a slave. For a short time, everything went well for Joseph in the home where he worked, but when his master's wife made false accusations against him, Joseph was put into prison. Let's read Genesis 19, verse 20. It says, "And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison." Joseph still trusted God, though. Even though Joseph was hated by his brothers and lied about by his master's wife, he still trusted in the only true and living God. He knew he was a sinner and could only be forgiven by God's mercy. He trusted in God's promises, just like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No one can ever please God unless he believes what God says. Let's read Hebrews 11, verse 6. Hebrews, it's in the New Testament, 11, verse 6. It says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." The greatest thing that you can do is to accept God's word as the truth and to trust in all that he has written in the Bible. God did not fail Joseph even when he was in prison. Let's read Acts 7, 9, and 10. Acts chapter 7, verse 9 and 10. It says, "And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. But God was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor in the wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his house." God took care of Joseph because he had a wonderful plan for Joseph's life. Now that Joseph was in prison, it looked impossible that he would ever become the leader and ruler of his family. But God never changes. Let's read Lamentations 22 and 23. Lamentations 3, 22 and 23. "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." God never changes. He is always faithful. God always does everything he has promised. He is not like people who change their minds, forget their promises, or tell lies. Let's turn back to Genesis 41, 1 through 8. Genesis 41, 1 through 8. "And it came to pass, at the end of 2 full years, that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-flavored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Although God spoke to people in the past through dreams, and was planning to show Pharaoh through his dream what was about to happen in Egypt, that is not God's usual way of speaking to us now. Why is that? Does he no longer know what is going to happen? Of course he does. He has not changed. He still knows everything about the future. Since God doesn't usually speak to people today through dreams, how then does he tell us what he wants us to know about him and the future? He teaches us the things he wants us to know through his word, the Bible. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, did not know or worship the true living God. The Egyptians worshipped the sun, moon, and the stars, animals and creeping creatures, and the Nile River. But even though they did not worship God, God planned to use this king and his country to fulfill the purposes of God. Let's read Proverbs 21, verse 1. Proverbs 21, verse 1. Says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. God is ruler over all people and nations, even though they may not know him or worship him. He can use anyone in whatever way he chooses to fulfill his purposes, because God is sovereign. He is the supreme ruler of everything. Whenever we make something, it belongs to us. And we make the choices about how our belongings will be used. If you make a batch of cookies, they're yours to keep, give, take to a bake sale. If you erect an apartment building, you decide whether to rent it out or sell it to another owner. God is the creator of all people, and he is the giver and sustainer of life. He has made us, and we rightfully belong to him. Let's read Psalm 24, 1 and 2. One book over. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Says, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the floods. God can do whatever he wishes with us. Let's read Acts 17, 24 and 25. Acts 17, 24 and 25. It says, God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Verse 25. Neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needeth anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things. And because God is righteous, everything that he ever does to people is right. Let's turn over another time. 1 Chronicles 29, 11 and 12. 1 Chronicles, not 1 Corinthians. 1 Chronicles 29, 11 and 12. It says, Thine, O Lord, is the greatness, and the power, and the glory, and the victory, and the majesty. For all that is in the heaven and the earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Lord, and thou art exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come of thee, and thou reignest over all. And in thine hand is power and might, and in thine hand it is to make great, and to give strength unto all. God was working through the lives of an Egyptian pharaoh and an Israelite prisoner on behalf of all his people. At this time, Joseph was in prison. And even there in prison, Joseph believed that God's purposes were right for him. Let's read Hebrews 11, verse 12. Hebrews 11, verse 12. It says, Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky multitude, and as the sand which is on the seashore innumerable. It's Hebrews 11, 1 and 2, not 12. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Even there in prison, Joseph believed that God's purposes were right for him. Though he did not know at the time how God was going to work, Joseph trusted God and lived by faith, believing that God would do what was best for him. Let's read Genesis 41, back in Genesis 41, verse 14 through 32. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself, and changed his raiment, and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of a river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known what they had eaten them, but that they were still ill-favored, as at the beginning. And so I awoke. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, and there was none that could declare it unto me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Joseph was unable to interpret the dreams of the king, but he trusted in the Lord to give him the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams. Let's read Daniel 2, 27 and 28. Daniel 2, 27 and 28. It says, Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the smoothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of the head upon thy bed are these. God has interpreted dreams for some time, and then Daniel lists the dream. God gave Joseph understanding so that the king would know what was about to take place in his country. God never fails those who trust in him. Psalm 22, 4 and 5. It says, Our fathers trusted in thee. They trusted, and thou didst deliver them. They cried unto thee, and were delivered. They trusted in thee, and were not confounded. God never fails those who trust in him. Let's turn back to Genesis 41 and read verses 33 through 41. It says, Now therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7th plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And the food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And we read on to verse 41. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. In verse 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. Even though Joseph had been through difficult experiences, the Lord was still in control. The Lord had not forgotten Joseph. The dreams which God had given to him as a youth were about to be fulfilled. God always does what he plans. When it was time for him to do what he planned, he brought Joseph out of prison and gave him a high position, just like he had shown him through his dreams when he was a boy. Let's read Psalm 105, 16 and 23 through 23. Psalm 105, 16 through 23. It says, Moreover, he called for a famine upon the land. He brake the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them, even Joseph, who was sold for a servant, whose feet they hurt with feathers. He was laid in iron, until the time that his word came. The word of the Lord tried him. The king sent and loosed him, even the ruler of the people, and let him go free. He made him lord of his house, the ruler over all his substance, to bind his princes at his pleasure, and teach his senators wisdom. Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of him. This is his dream being fulfilled. Let's read back in Genesis, chapter 42, verse 1 through 3. It says, Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do we look one upon another? And said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. Let's read verse 6 through 8. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came, and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, and made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence came ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. Let's read back in Genesis 37, 5 through 9. Says, And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Thou shalt indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams, and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Again, God was bringing to pass the things that he had shown young Joseph in his dreams. His brothers did indeed bow down before him. Let's read Genesis 43, 1 and 2. And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. And let's turn to 45, 3 through 9. It says, And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be ye not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years, in which there shall be neither be earning nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. Joseph wept when he disclosed his true identity to his brothers. Let's read this in Genesis 50, 20. Says, But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. That is not the verse. Rather than treating his brothers as their deeds deserved, Joseph explained to them that God was in control of the situation, and that he had used the brothers' horrible actions to work for good. Let's read on in our text. Genesis 25 through 28. And they went up out of Egypt, and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he said unto them, and whence he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him. The spirit of Jacob their father revived. And verse 28. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Let's read on. Genesis 46, 5 through 7. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, and their little ones, and their wives, in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. God knows what is going to happen. God always keeps his promises. Many years before, God had told Abraham that his descendants would go to another country. Let's read Genesis 15:13. It says, And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Even though many hundreds of years had passed, God did what he had promised. All that God says in his word will happen just as God said. A very difficult series of events in Joseph's life actually was the unfolding of the fulfillment of God's promises. The descendants of Jacob, or Israel, were now called the children of Israel, Israelites, or just Israel. Today, we are still hearing about Israel in the news. And today, God still keeps his promises. He is still the sovereign God, and through the Bible, he is still calling men to believe in him.